and it's great to be a part of this education lineup because it's very connected. As you'll see in a couple minutes, I'm going to share just a little bit in the beginning about my personal story, some of which is connected to Kansas City. Just why am I passionate about this? And some of this starts with my family, and this is the next slide, which I am the trailer child of two World War II parents. My dad was a lieutenant commander on the USS Dyson, and he and my mom lived here in Kansas City. And you can go to the next slide. These are 4 of my brothers. I have 5 male cousins, and I used to say it was perfect training for corporate America. But it was also interesting growing up with parents who were much older, and I was kind of that surprise child. And what's interesting about this lineup of people is that in my career, this is sort of what it looked like for me as being the first and the only woman in publishing. And so my family kind of set me up for that. But we had some difficult times growing up. I mentioned about my dad, and today's Veterans Day. I think a lot about all the people who have served our country. Also, he grew up in a little town called Audubon, Iowa. His dad ran a hardware store, and the year before the Great Depression, his only brother died in a bobsled accident. Then the next year, his dad, who had this hardware store, lost everything, and they were forced to move to Omaha. And during the time he was in college, he graduated, enlisted in the Navy, and then the war broke out. So these are some of the things that happened to him before he was 30 years of age. So fast forward to the time when he's about 50, and I've just been born. He's got these 4 other children. He ended up having 3 nervous breakdowns. This is a time when a lot of people didn't understand about mental health, the different kinds of things that can happen, the kind of traumas and stresses that many of you have had in your family's histories for generations. And so by the time I was in really 3rd through 5th grade, there was a lot of chaos, a lot of uncertainty, really about how were we going to function, and how was he going to be able to really recalibrate? Fortunately, because of my mom and the very strong person she is, and the strong person that my dad was, they were able to regroup and get things back on track. But I grew up really relating always to the outsiders. My mom made it clear to me, you're going to get a sewing machine, you're going to make all your own clothes, you're going to babysit. You might have friends at your high school and they're going to tennis camp or violin camp, and you're going to be doing other things. The day I turned 16 was the first day that I started working. And I'm somebody who, I didn't have the 30 million words by the time I was 3 years old. I got a 16 on my ACT. I didn't grow up with a lot of those kinds of resources, even though I had some of that baked into my family. The chaotic situation is very similar to so many different students out there who are like the people that Andrew works with. And we work very closely with the tribal colleges, the HBCUs, and the Hispanic serving institutions. So I've always had a passion for the people who are the outliers, the people who are on the edges of the opportunities, the people who did not grow up, like Tyrone's son, with so many different advantages of how the game is played, and then the resources to be able to play that game and onboard into that. So this is where I'm coming from. This is why I'm passionate. These are, my 5 male cousins, my 4 brothers. My mom and I were very close to each other. She also had 2 brothers. But it's a strong story, and I feel so honored to be with you all today because my brothers were all born on the state line. One of them had very serious asthma. I think another thing that really added to my dad's, pressure. And so the family was forced to move to Tucson for his health after they had tried everything in the 50s, from acupuncture to Denver Asthma Hospital. And fortunately, he's 70 years old now, and he's doing well. But that was a big, big change that my family had to incur that also kind of contributed to, I think, the pressure that my dad suffered. And I think about mental illness today, how many people are under such stress coming out of the last few years, and how our nation, we still need a Betty Ford of alcoholism for mental health. And so part of what I say is I think all of us have to look at ways in which we can embrace our humanity and be those people that are real about the kinds of things that make us the strongest and make us the best that we can be. So this is part of my story, and before we go off of this, I'll just share that I ended up, being a very average high school kid. I went to University of Arizona, but I had these 4 older brothers, and those brothers were the networks and the hidden curriculum that you all had, Tyrone, baked into your zip code, or that people who are from different backgrounds of privilege have these things in their DNA or in their neighborhoods. And so one of my brothers was transferred to Columbia, had a rent-controlled apartment on 109th Street, and he said to me, you've got to have an internship in New York City. You've got to have an internship in Washington, D.C. You're going to a state school. You've got kind of average grades out of high school. These are things we didn't know, but I want you to know these things. He also said, save your waitressing money, get yourself over to Spain, learn a language. He said, don't talk to a single American when you're over there, or you're going to be wasting your time and your money. So I had these sort of lessons from their hard-learned lessons of things that didn't work out for them. Craig graduated Phi Beta Kappa from Columbia, and it took him, quite a while to find a job because he went from his dorm to class to the library, and he didn't realize how to plug into New York City. So these are things that are still going on today. Pre-pandemic, Gallup reported that 38% of our graduates were not in jobs commensurate with their education. That is not a failing of the students we're serving. That is a failing of our institutional ivory towers that are still so hierarchical that we're not better connecting students to what GlobalMindED's mission is, which is to connect students to role models, mentors, internships, and jobs. So we'll go to the next slide. And our mission is to close the equity gap by creating a capable, diverse talent pipeline through connections to role models, mentors, internships, and jobs for low-income, returning adults, first-gen to college, inclusive leaders who teach them, work with them, and want to hire them. Next slide. So what do? We are all about specific actions that can connect students to these different opportunities. So we work very specifically with colleges. We have a number of different programs, and I'm very interested to talk to Andrew and also work with you, Jerry, on some of your internships for some of our art students. But we work with North Carolina A&T, South Carolina State, Motley State College, UTEP, several of the different tribal colleges, many of the, like Fort Lewis, majority tribal, serving indigenous populations. And we also put on events. So we do programs at different colleges that involve wraparound services, and we also put on different events where young people, just as you just shared, can see themselves in you, and they can come to an event like this, or they can see something we do online. And last June, we had 300 speakers, 73% of them were people of color. So for students who are at HBCUs or they're at PWIs where their faculty do not look like them, they can come and see college presidents who they relate to. They can come and see business leaders like Wendy and many of you who they relate to, and they say, I can be in a role like that someday. So next slide. These are some of the wraparound services that we provide. This is actually a series that I was lead author on this series, myself and 3 other women. And at the time that came out, I don't have a master's degree. We were competing with all men with their PhDs, and we were the first people to connect academic skills to personal and professional skills. Nobody had put those 3 things together before. But because we weren't from academia, it was very easy for us to see the very practical ways in which students can respond, and how you have to give them examples, and you have to show them lots of examples of different people that they can relate to. And if you don't do those kinds of things, then they are interacting with content that's theoretical and not hitting them really in their emotional center. During the pandemic, we got the rights to this because we want to be able to make this free to students who can't afford it. We do professional mentoring with freshmen. We work with Microsoft alums and Stanford MBAs and people at several of our different company partners. But it's so powerful to work with people as freshmen with professional role models who can really be helping them with the hidden curriculum the way my brothers were able to help me. We have a daily newsletter that's read by 15,000 people a day. We have a Bridge into College program, and then we have monthly equity events that are led by people of color with primarily diverse panelists. And that's in STEM, that's in tech, K-12, higher ed, and then we connect students with the role models and the internships. We have this annual conference, and then 2019 we came up with the Inclusive Leader Awards, and these are like the Academy Awards for DEI. And we say until these people who get these awards are as well known as the sports stars and the movie stars, we're not going to have the kinds of representation that we need in the C-suite of our businesses, on the boards of our businesses, on trustees of universities, until people like this are well known and what they've done is well known, so other people can follow their lead. And then we connect students to the promotion pathway jobs. I was very fortunate that I was first female AVP when I was 26. I was the first female vice president when I was 30. And it wasn't because I was brighter than all the people with the really great Ivy League degrees that I started with. It was only because I had this hidden curriculum and this hidden knowledge that my brothers shared with me. And so I really believe there are so many talented people out there, and they don't have the access to the know-how and the hidden pathways and curriculum, and then the networks. Next slide. This is one of our partners for our mentor program. So Chris Motley is a friend from 8 years ago. First gen to college, beat the odds to get into Columbia, Kellogg MBA, wound up at Goldman Sachs, was a funder there of a lot of different tech companies, and then decided to start Mentor Spaces based on his own lived experiences of what he wished he had had as a student starting college. So he's been wonderful to work with. Next slide. This was a week ago. It was really a great honor. We had one of our events for the first time partnering with Georgia Tech, and Dr. Glenda Glover, who I adore. She was one of these winners a few years ago. This is Dr. Thomas, president of Morehouse, and then Dr. Brian Blake, Georgia State University, which many of you may know, but that has like the largest population of African American students of any state college in the country. So it was really great to hear them. And then Rose Scott, who's with WABE, they live streamed this event all over the country. So schools that were interested in this, but they can't afford to travel to Atlanta, or they can't even afford to go down the street, they were able to do events with their different students and have them feel like they were in the room. Next slide. These are some of the students that came, and they were able to meet business leaders like you. They were able to meet and see those college presidents. North Carolina A&T, some of the students from Georgia Highlands. This is a student that was with us in 2018, was one of our ambassadors during the pandemic, became an entrepreneur, and he's got a very successful shoe store in Rome, Georgia. So it was pretty cool, because the next slide, we had him introduce, we'll go to the next slide, just more students, and then next slide, our student who started the shoes company, introduced Killer Mike, who has an entire room of nothing but shoes in his house. So we were able to make a connection with interest there. And then this is a wonderful man as well from AARP, Dr. Jean Oxius. And this is our panel of all students. So in the same way that there's a panel of experts, at our conference last year, of all the different panels, almost every single panel had a student featured. So we're really big believers. If you don't give students that agency and that voice, they might graduate and they might get that job, but are they going to get promoted at age 26 or at age 28? They're not, if they're not brought to those places of power with their own voice to influence what's happening. So we're really big believers. You've got to co-create the future with students and give them the agency and the audience to do that. Next slide. These are some of the events that we put on. We just became an initiative of the Foundation to Support the United Nations, so we'll have an event. It's actually going to be now March 22nd at the UN, and then we'll have our event, which I've already told Wendy would love to have all of you all involved in that. We'll have about 1,200 people in June, and it's like 75% diverse people, several hundred students, and it's just a pipeline equity event where There's people there in their 80s. There's this one woman who's still publishing a book a year in her 80s. And then there are high school students. And it's just great to see generations of people see themselves and who they can become. And for people like us, I'm going to be 60 in December, but to be so inspired by young people and the amazing ideas and the kinds of things that they're doing, that you're so hopeful for the future because of your walk with these incredible people. Next slide. So this is our class from last June, and you'll just see the kind of incredible diversity from around the country that we have. And we do a one-day pre-conference for these first-gen leaders, and so then all of a sudden they have friends from around the country. So if they get a job in Chicago and they're from Miami or they're from, rural Iowa, they have somebody who they can call, and they have a network that's larger than what their university might be able to provide. And I think that's another thing, is no one university can do it all. It's like your network has to be bigger than that to be connected to the nation, to be connected to the world, and then for you to be able to really share your gifts and talents on the national and global stage. Next slide. And this is just some of the rest of them. Next slide. This is our team. We are a majority diverse team. Sally has been with us since we started in 2014. I'll also just share, I left corporate America after 17 years. I started my own company, self-funded it with some of the book royalties, and it was called Lifebound. We publish books for 5th through 12th graders, do inclusive coaching. But in 2010, I got diagnosed with lymphoma. So I went through a couple of years of treatments for lymphoma. And when I left corporate, I taught for 2 years in the federal prison. I taught Native Americans in maximum security, and during the day taught people in the Denver housing projects. And one night realized some of these men are the fathers of some of the people I'm with during the day. And so just connecting all those things and saying, if you come out of a cancer experience, what's the biggest thing you could do to change the world? And GlobalMindED was what that answer was for me. So started in 2014. You can imagine that when I'd have meetings with some of these people, I'll just say some of the dominant caste people that I was trying to get on board, and they'd say, now why do we need something like this? And I'd say, well, if you can get me a woman and some diverse people on your team to come into this meeting, they'll be able to share with you why we need this, because we need this. Then it became a lot more clear during COVID what we were doing and why it mattered. But it has, I just got to say, I sometimes say I've broken a couple glass ceilings with hammers in corporate, but equity issues, you need dynamite. It's like building the Eisenhower Tunnel through the mountains of Colorado. It really, and that's why I think it's so powerful to be in a room with leaders like this, because we have to all be very seriously, energetically linked, because it is that intractable. So, anyway, Sally's been with me from the beginning. She's originally from Kazakhstan. Ilsa is one of our students from 2018, and I met her months ago, and she came up afterwards. I was giving a session at Rotary because they're trying to be a lot more inclusive, and she came up and she said, here's a picture of us from 2018. I just got my master's in international relations, and I said, are you looking for a job? Can I interview you tomorrow? So she's on our team, and it's just wild. Even last week in Atlanta, several of the people from a few years ago are now faculty or they're working in Atlanta. So Yusara, immigrant from Somalia, amazing young person. Kyra is at Bethune-Cookman, originally from Louisville. She was our intern all summer, and I just got to give kudos to her, because you got to be scrappy to create opportunities for yourself. And she didn't want to come out to Denver, and I said, Kyra, you got to be in Denver this summer, because you've been in Daytona Beach and you've been in Louisville, but it's going to change your life to be living here. She came out there, and we paid her, but Denver's expensive, so we got her a bed in one of the upstairs rooms of the offices that we occupy, and she lived there. I was like, you can save money, and you won't have a commute except down the stairs. And she is just an incredible young woman. And her mom died at the hand of police brutality when she was 6 years old. So she's done 12 years of amazing healing work. It's like being with an 85-year-old, really advanced soul human, this woman. And so these are the kinds of people that are in this network of amazing humans, and I just so blessed to work with these folks. Maddie is our newsletter editor, and she's now back in Colorado, but she wanted to be in Madrid last year, and I was like, you know what, you can do this from anywhere. Rashawn is one of our Native American leaders, and just incredible person, graduated from University of Denver, and literally at our conference this second day, we had an open mic, and people could get up there if they wanted to say anything else to the group or they wanted to make a commitment. And he got up and shared about some racism at a PWI where he went to school. And he shared a song that he wrote to heal himself and his people and the people who had perpetrated this. And he sang this most amazing song, and the entire room didn't have a dry eye. And at the end he said, and I just graduated 3 weeks ago and I'm looking for a job. And I was just like, okay. You have a job. You're amazing. Anybody who gets up here and can do something like that and just heal themselves and not carry that hatred forward is incredible. And then Angela Martinez, I just have to brag one more time and then we'll close this out. But Angela, single mom, spent time in prison because she had a boyfriend that had the drugs in the car, and like a lot of women that wind up in prison, this is their story. People wouldn't hire her. And she went to community college. It took her 7 years to get her undergraduate degree. She's 40 years old, graduated 4.0 from MSU Denver, and she is just extraordinary. And, you know, these are the people that are out there in our talent pipeline that if you don't look for them in different ways, if we don't have our circles wider, if we don't start to commune with people in larger and larger ways, we cannot find these amazing humans. But there's no reason that we can't find them because they are there. So next slide. And these are some of our executive leaders. I will just say this man, incredible person. He was with me in Atlanta last week, but his parents were sharecroppers, and he went to South Carolina State, and then he got a master's at University of Tennessee, Stanford Business School, started AT&T, broke some glass ceilings there, started 2 tech companies. His son was valedictorian at Morehouse the year that Robert Smith forgave the loans. But what he realized is that how his son grew up is similar, Tyrone, to how your son has grown up. And a lot of his friends at Morehouse, they didn't grow up that way. They didn't graduate into those kinds of jobs. His son's now second year at Yale in social justice. But Ken's so passionate to work with us because there's so many more people whose gifts and talents can be realized the way your sons are, the way his sons are. And we've got to get those people to the table. Anyway, Cheryl Crazy Bull, just incredible leaders there. Okay, next slide. And that's our board. Next slide. And then these are some people who work with us for the conference, and we're really hoping they'll start writing checks for our programs at colleges, because we want to be at every HBCU and tribal college and Hispanic serving. Next slide. And these are some of our sponsors. These people are offering our students a lot of internships. HP, we went to the White House Initiative on the HBCUs in September. Next slide. These are some of our partners, and we're nonpartisan. And, you know, I guess I'll just close by saying that our goal for GlobalMindED is really to be what my brothers were to me, for all those people out there who are not from zip codes of know-how and privilege, or for whom they didn't have the 30 million words when they were 3 years old, and we don't want their test scores to keep them in a little box because they didn't have that exposure. And so we need to just broaden how we see all kinds of talent, all kinds of ability, neurodiverse capabilities, all different ways. So thank you for sharing this space with me, and I most of all really want to have our community embrace all of you and figure out how we can 100x our impact, because a lot of these companies, we have to be able to go to their CEOs and say, it's leadership from the top down. If you don't start leading to really make these DEI goals a priority, you can have a diverse board, you can have a diverse C-suite, you can do all these things just like you can achieve any other business goal. But we have to all work together to hold these leaders accountable. Same is true with people in the arts and people running big, entities like the Met. And then our foundations, the money has got to start to move differently, and it's got to be a lot more informed, and it's got to be a lot more fluid. We've got 600 billionaires in the United States and 800 billionaires in the world, and we can solve any problem, but we really need to come together differently to be able to do that. And I look forward to working with all of you on the dynamite to get through these things and to really shift, make it happen, and to be, I hope, one of the most useful allies in your circle. So thanks so much.